And tariffs, New Delhi reaffirms its Russia ties. Prime Minister Modi speaks to Putin over the phone as they emphasize India and Russia's strategic partnership. Earlier in the week, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval met with the Russian president in the Kremlin, confirming a visit by Putin to India later this year.
What this is about is an honest, full, and frank dialogue.
Mixed messages from Washington, D.C. The State Department vows frank talks on trade with New Delhi amid a stalemate over Russian oil. President Trump, though, says no trade talks with India until things are resolved. Amid Trump's talk of Russian crude fueling Moscow's war machine, Trump and Putin are expected to hold an in-person dialogue next week. The meeting comes despite Russia's refusal to halt attacks on Ukraine. Putin says the UAE could be where the meeting happens, though reports say that Rome, Hungary, and Switzerland are in the mix. Donald Trump plans to nominate Stephen Miron to fill a temporary seat in the Federal Reserve's board. Miron is a vocal critic of Fed Chair Jerome Powell, a close Trump ally and a key architect of his tariff strategy. Miron insists the president's sweeping levies won't drive inflation, a view sharply different from Powell's and other Fed leaders. A political showdown in Texas with national implications. Republicans in Texas are seeking to redraw its election map in a bid to claim more congressional seats at the midterms next year. Over 50 Democrats have fled Texas to avoid a vote on the matter. Now other blue and red states are on a collision course as they look to redraw maps as well. This week has seen tariffs on more than 90 of America's trading partners take effect. India is one of those hardest hit with 50% tariffs. First, Trump imposed 25% duties on Indian goods and then additional penalties of another 25% over India's imports of Russian oil. That new levy on crude will kick in on August 27th. Now, Trump has said buying Russian crude fuels the country's war machine in Ukraine. India has called it double standard, saying the U.S. carries out trade with Russia too, buying fertilizers, chemicals, and other materials used in EVs and in the nuclear industry. Now, since then, we're getting mixed signals from Washington, D.C. Trump says there will be no increased negotiations with India on trade, but a spokesperson from the State Department says full and frank dialogue to address differences will continue.
President, just to follow up on the India tariffs, do you expect increased trade negotiations, since you've announced the 50% tariff?
No, not until we get it resolved.
About is an honest, full, and frank dialogue about real concerns that this administration has, that the president has outlined very clearly, addressing those concerns through his actions. He's spoken about them, whether it's about the purchase of Russian oil, whether it's about the trade imbalance. Addressing those concerns is important. So the president's been very clear. His concerns about what he has seen from India speak for themselves. He's truthed multiple times about it. But ultimately, this is about a frank and full dialogue, and that's what it means to advance American interests. That's what it means to really have full diplomatic dialogue with partners to address concerns that we need to see addressed.
Meanwhile, New Delhi is doubling down on its strategic partnership with Moscow. It says it will continue to buy Russian oil. Prime Minister Modi has had a detailed conversation with what Mr. Modi called his good friend Putin. This week also saw India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval meeting President Putin at the Kremlin. Doval confirmed the Russian leader will visit India later this year. Meanwhile, in a show of strength by another BRICS partner, the Indian Prime Minister also spoke with Brazil's president over the phone, reaffirming a strategic partnership on trade, health, and defense. Now let's take a closer look at what happens now. Can India and the US bounce back from this low point? Should India retaliate? We're joined by Wendy Cutler, a former trade diplomat who has worked on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, US-China negotiations, and the US-Korea Free Trade Agreement. Wendy, thank you for your time here on Washington Watch. Wendy, you've spent 3 decades as a trade negotiator. How bad is the fallout between the United States and India?
I think it's a fluid situation, but let's say right now we're at a recent low point. U.S. India relations have been strengthening under both Republican and administrations, including Trump 1.0, for many years. We've been doing more together economically, strategically, through the Quad, through other groupings. And so what the two countries are experiencing now is a clear setback. But I'm hopeful that both sides can find a way through what looks like a mess right now.
Wendy, China has put up a fight with the US as far as not caving into Trump's demands as well. You could argue that Trump is giving Beijing more wiggle room because basically China has this trump card, which is rare earths. That's important to the Silicon Valley tech bros and even US defense companies. Wondering what leverage does India need to show to strike a deal that's favorable to India?
Look, India has a lot going for it, but whether that serves as negotiating leverage is a different question. I'm sure there are calls within India to retaliate in kind against the United States. I personally don't think that would be a beneficial move. I think our president has shown how he responds to retaliation, and I think that would unnecessarily spiral what's already a bad situation into a worse one. But I think India can remind the United States of the important market it has, also the important alternative its market provides to companies that are invested in China, and frankly, our overall strategic partnership, which frankly is extremely important, particularly in this very unstable world.
Right, Wendy. Now, you said that India needs to be cautious in not retaliating. India has been measured and calm throughout. Maybe do you think we should change strategy, perhaps, given how ugly things have gotten?
Look, I don't pretend to give advice to any country. Each country, each government will do what they need to do. But I think particularly with retaliating, I think all countries should really think that through, because it is evident that our president, whether they like it or not, is just not going to let it die, at that level. What he tends to do is view that as an assault against him, and he'll come back punching. So again, it's up to India to decide the best way to proceed. I mean, I'm a bit encouraged that it seems like we're having a trade team go over to India in the next few weeks to continue negotiations. And also, at least, even though the 25% tariff came in against India, there's a 21-day limit before the next 25% tranche would come in. And so that 3 weeks in a trade negotiator's world can be a long time, and particularly with the team going out there, there is a scenario where there is de-escalation and maybe even a trade agreement is reached within the next 21 days.
Wendy, India says it's been unfairly punished for buying Russian oil when the US and Europe are also doing business with Russia and also enabling the Kremlin's war machine. It's really a valid argument, calling out double standards, but do you think it's an effective argument, or will the Trump administration just shrug it off like it does with so many other things?
Look, I think it's important for other countries to point out inconsistencies in our policy. I don't think that those kind of points, necessarily lay on deaf ears. I also don't think it's going to change the situation overnight. But I have seen our president in the past 48 hours say that he's going to be looking at other countries as well that purchase Russian oil. So who knows? Maybe he said that in response to something that, India has expressed to him. But I know that there's a sense of unfairness in Delhi. Why are they being penalized? But when you look at the numbers, Indian imports of Russian oil have increased dramatically in recent years. There's no doubt about that. That's kind of where we are. And again, I think it's not, from my point of view, we're not asking India overnight to just end all of these imports. I think that if India were to show that it's taking this seriously and it starts decreasing its imports in a sizable way and it starts looking for other importers, I think that could contribute to a solution between both governments.
How much of this trade battle with India is really a proxy war with Russia, Wendy, because Trump appears to be fed up with Putin over the Ukraine war, and turning up the heat on India on Russian oil is actually intended to put the squeeze on Moscow?
That's one way to look at it, but I would also say that there's talk now of a meeting between Putin and Trump, and I think that shows that we're not looking for proxies. I think Trump's looking to solve this war, and he's going right to the source.
All right, so this meeting between Trump and Putin next week could help things go away, do you think? Much of those penalties on Russian oil, perhaps?
Look, in international politics, it's very rare that anything like goes away as a result of a meeting. I think what the expectation could be that with both leaders talking, maybe they can chart a way forward to de-escalate and over time to end this conflict.
Wendy Cutler, former U.S. trade diplomat, joining us here on Washington, D.C. Thank you for your time. Let's get you some quick facts now on the tariffs. Where are the tariffs collected, if you're wondering? In the U.S., tariffs are typically paid by the importing companies and collected at ports of entry by Customs and Border Protection. Duties are not paid by exporters. Now let's take a look at how much tariffs are being collected. $50 billion every month is really the estimate. According to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, tariffs already in place pulled in $30 billion last month. Lutnick says that if duties are slapped on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals, that number goes up to $1 trillion. Now, moving on to what happens to all the money that's been collected. Tariff revenue goes into a general fund, with President Trump and Republicans saying it could help trim the $1.3 trillion deficit. Trump has also suggested rebate checks for Americans, though that would need congressional approval. Moving on now to some other news. In an exclusive interview to NDTV's Vishnu Som, the Israeli Prime Minister says he will increase military operations in the besieged Palestinian territory of Gaza, but will not annex it entirely. The plan involves significant military movement, but stops short of a complete territorial takeover. His comments come as global outrage grows over the war in Gaza, which critics say has devastated millions of Palestinians and pushed the region to the brink of famine. Meanwhile, more than 40 people protesting the war and worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza were arrested outside the Trump International Hotel in New York City. Here's more.
Go back on the sidewalk now.
Hundreds took to the streets of New York City, marching,
Jews say,
chanting, Jews say no more.
Jews say,
Jews say no more to mass starvation. Jews say no more!
And demanding an end to the war in Gaza. The protest began at Columbus Circle and was led by If Not Now, a Jewish-American group calling on the Trump administration to pressure Israel to let more humanitarian aid into Gaza. Banners read, "Stop ethnic cleansing, let Gaza live, and not in our name."
as Jews and for many of us as Americans whose government is funding and enabling these atrocities, we have to choose whether we want to be responsible for a genocide and ethnic cleansing being carried out with our taxpayer dollars and in our name.
The The crowd demanded action, urging the U.S. government to use its leverage to stop what they describe as mass starvation and collective punishment in Gaza.
Jews can never know true safety as long as Palestinians remain in danger. The only true safety is shared safety. The only durable freedom is freedom for all.
Protesters moved through Manhattan with purpose and clarity. Among the demonstrators was Lily Greenberg Call, a former Biden administration official who publicly resigned last year over U.S. support for the war.
If you have just realized what is happening in Gaza and are naming it for what it is now, you're obligated to come out into the streets and be really loud in naming that this is a genocide, that this is forced intentional starvation, and that doing everything you can to make sure that it stops.
Demonstrators reached Trump International Hotel by 8 p.m. local time. They sat down, chanting, singing, refusing to leave. Minutes later, NYPD officers began arresting them one by one. At least 40 people were detained for blocking traffic. They were loaded into police buses as the crowd slowly dispersed, but their message didn't. In a statement after the arrests, If Not Now called this the broadest Jewish coalition yet to take a stand against Israel's actions in Gaza. As protesters were taken away, their chants echoed through the city. Let Gaza live. Jews say no more. A powerful reminder that silence is complicity, and for these demonstrators, their faith demands resistance. Rhythm Arcadia's report for NDTV.
A new Trump administration policy is ringing alarm bells for immigrants applying for green cards through family ties, effective immediately. Those without legal status who apply for residency through a spouse or other relatives could face deportation under the new guidance from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Let's take a closer look at the story. We are joined by immigration lawyer Kripa Upadhyay. For more, Kripa, thank you for coming on here on Washington Watch. Kripa, so how exactly would this work? I'm just wondering, so if, say, there is an American citizen applying for a visa for her husband who is in the U.S. illegally for whatever reason, say overstaying a tourist visa, then the husband could be deported.
Yes. And again, this goes back to this administration's extreme focus on the enforcement component. So we're seeing a couple of things, Allister. One of the things that we are seeing is any period of overstay is something that they are prosecuting to the fullest extent that they can. Historically, if you had entered the United States on a tourist visa or any other visa and had overstayed, but are married to a U.S. citizen, you would have been allowed to at least appear for an interview and complete the process in the U.S. Right now, if the marriage, for whatever reason, was determined to be fraudulent or lacking sufficient documentation to show that it was a valid marriage, then at that point you would face a denial of the underlying application, and that would then potentially put you into removal proceedings. However, what we are seeing now is individuals that are in process, called for an interview, are being arrested at the interview itself.
Is there any way to get out of this without having to face that deportation in that case?
No. No, the only way that you could file for an adjustment of status is via the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, right? And so what you're essentially doing at this point, if you are undocumented in the country, is waving a flag, if you will, saying, here I am, and then essentially making an affirmative election to face the consequences of having to go in for an interview and the perspective of being arrested at that interview and placed in removal proceedings. This also then dovetails into alternate proposals that have come in because of alleged backlogs in the court system, right? So the immigration court system is enormously backlogged, and that's, again, contributing to that, because the more people entering immigration removal proceedings, we already have a backlog of about 3 million from last year. we're just adding more numbers to that. So if you have
Indeed.
a citizen
Right.
that is married to a non-citizen that is seeking adjustment of status in the U.S., if USCIS makes the decision to deny relief to that person, it's now up to the immigration courts. But the immigration
Indeed.
courts process is already backlogged something like 5 to 7 years right now for a final adjudication on the merits. Right? So it's an absolute snowball
an
of
immigration
consequences.
attorney joining us here on Seattle. Thank you so very much for your time. Got to leave it there. Sorry, running out of time here on the show. In other news now, Texas could become the petri dish for several battles that are poised to play out across the United States. It pits blue states against red in an ultimate fight for the U.S. Congress. Here's what you need to know.
A political storm in Texas with consequences of a power grab in Washington, D.C. At the behest of U.S. President Donald Trump, Texas is trying to redraw the state's congressional map that could create up to 5 new Republican seats in the U.S. House of Representatives.
And we're raising the awareness, alerting the nation that what's happening in Texas will not only impact Texas, but the entire nation.
It's called gerrymandering, when political parties draw lines in voting districts to give them an advantage. This is legal under U.S. law unless done to discriminate over race. Republicans have a very slim majority in the U.S. House. With the midterms next year, they want to lock in more seats. Texas Governor Greg Abbott called a special session, and Republicans released a new map that could give them that advantage.
Greg Abbott is saying that he wants to create a single-party state here in Texas by removing basically all of the Democrats from office. That's never happened in the state of Texas, and we're not going to let it happen.
To block the vote, over 50 Texas Democrats fled the state, flying to Illinois, Massachusetts, and New York. That's because the Texas House needs 2/3 of lawmakers present to vote.
The House stands adjourned.
Republicans voted to issue arrest warrants for the missing lawmakers. But as long as they stay out of Texas, they are safe. They are also being fined $500 per day for being absent. Trump wants Missouri to do the same. Florida is also considering redrawing districts, likely adding more Republican seats.
This is what democracy looks like.
In a tit-for-tat move, Democrats in California, New York, and Illinois say they'll redraw their own maps too, to cut down Republican seats. California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom is planning a statewide vote to make it happen. So, expect more upheaval over the power struggle on who controls the U.S. Congress. Rhythm Arcadia, NDTV World.
Here's a news wrap of all things Epstein. Now, former President Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary are amongst a group of high-profile figures subpoenaed by a congressional committee investigating the late child molester Jeffrey Epstein. Meanwhile, Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer says she is willing to testify before the congressional committee investigating Epstein, but with legal protections in place. Ghislaine's scheduled deposition on August 11th has now been postponed indefinitely. Now, amid this unending saga, more victims have begun to speak out.
How do you feel about seeing Jeffrey Epstein in the news every single day and every night, all the time? And the story in the news almost every day and every night. It's very upsetting to me, and I cry with tears like I am now. In my living room, watching this all the time, when I see it on the news every day, Jeffrey's in my brain, and I see him again and again, and I remember what he did to me in that hotel room. And I feel pain in my heart for myself and all for the other victims everywhere. And I see it every single day on the news.
And I believe, yes, the files should be
released. I'm tired of the government saying that they want to release them. So please just do it. Ghislaine Maxwell should not be pardoned. She was convicted of sex trafficking of children. This is a terrible crime.
An Epstein survivor there speaking out. That's it for Washington Watch. I'm Allister D'Souza in Washington, D.C.
This Raksha Bandhan. Send money to your family with Remitly. Remitly wishes you all a happy Raksha Bandhan.
No child should suffer the torture of trachoma. But so many are in pain right now. Nananga's lashes have turned inwards. They rip and tear away at his eyes. Pomelo's sight could be gone forever. He's just 3 years old. Kofanga screams for his mother. His eyes are so infected that he can't even see her. For so many children in the world's poorest countries, trachoma is torture. It's a painful infection often spread by flies, and it's destroying children's eyesight. But it could be stopped if you help today. By calling 0800 021 3925 and giving £2 a month to Sightsavers, you can help make sure children get the treatment they desperately need. You'll help us bring them the medicines and the care that can treat infections. And that means you'll be helping to save children from the torture of trachoma and a life of blindness. Please help us reach them. Call 0800 021 3925, text C7 to 82727, or go online and give just £2 a month now. Because we need you to help save the sight of children like Nananga. We need you to help save them from the torture of trachoma.
Don't let gaps in your travel insurance spoil your holiday. Go without the doubt. Insure and go. Call 0800 198 0198. Trusted by over 27 million travellers.
For such gentle souls, working donkeys in the Middle East lead terribly hard lives. For such trusting animals, donkeys are too often abused and exploited. These sensitive, loyal animals often suffer the cruelest pain. And now, conflicts in the Middle East have seen donkeys terribly injured, malnourished, and in desperate need of care. The cost of medications has soared, but there is something you can do. Please call Safe Haven for Donkeys on 0800 144 5802 or go online and give a life-saving gift of just £2 a month. Safe Haven for Donkeys is dedicated to transforming lives in Gaza, the West Bank, Israel, and Egypt. Your gift means our mobile vet clinics can provide emergency treatment for injured donkeys. We heal wounds and ensure donkeys aren't suffering. We also work with local communities, helping them to look after and cherish their donkeys. You'll help us make sure there's always a place at our sanctuaries for abandoned or injured donkeys who have nowhere else to turn. Please call 0800 144 5802, text SAFE4 to 84902, go online or scan the QR code and give just £2 a month. Help save a donkey's life today.
Allegations made yesterday as new wine in an old bottle. The Election Commission continued to challenge the Leader of Opposition in the Lok Sabha, demanding a sworn affidavit on the allegations of voter fraud. So what is going to be the end game in this ongoing controversy? That's the question that I ask on the show tonight. First up the story, then I bring in the guests.
Charges, counter-charges, threats and dares. An all-out attack and counter-attack. The knives are out in the Rahul versus EC battle over the vote chori charge. Rahul Gandhi on Friday doubled down on his allegations at a rally in Bengaluru.
महादेवापुरा में 6.5 लाख वोट हैं असेंबली में और उसमें से